I was on Sesame Street once, so I did do that.
You were on the show?
I was on Sesame Street one time.
No way.
But I was not age appropriate.
You were one of the kids, obviously.
I was not age appropriate. I was 11. I was like a little bit older than you should be when you're on Sesame Street. The kids were around me at like maybe 6 and 7.
Hey there, good people in crypto land. I'm Matt Leising, and this is my podcast, Decent People. Welcome to the conversation. So I'm recording this in mid-November, and the last couple of weeks have been tough after FTX decided to shit the bed, destroy its $32 billion valuation, and go bankrupt overnight. As I like to say, it's not crypto if there isn't a conference in a couple of days and there isn't some enormous blow up just in the rearview mirror. So here we are. On a lighter note, I'm really excited to have Chris Castig on the show today. He is a co-founder of Console.xyz, which is a decentralized alternative to Discord. And if you've ever been on Discord, you might know that it's sometimes tricky to navigate and not super intuitive. So I'm excited to see what Console has to offer as an alternative. We talked today with Chris about Kevin Kelly and Lawrence Lessig and some of the other pioneers and authors in the 1990s who were kind of the forefathers of the Web3 metaverse movement. I'm pretty sure that I've never had a guest on Decent People who is also on Sesame Street, so we're going to get into that. And we talk about how music and technology kind of came together and blew his mind when services like Napster and BitTorrent came out. We also get the lowdown on Console and how they're trying to adhere to Web3 protocols and the ethos of decentralization to offer an alternative to Discord. So let's get to the show. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Chris, how you doing? Thanks for being here.
Matt, super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you. So right off the bat, I noticed that you're a bit of a writer, and I don't get a lot of writers on here. So I'd love to just kind of dive into your writing experience. And you used to have a podcast. It was called On Books, I believe, and you did about 60 episodes, a wide range of topics from business to fiction to sort of motivational or sort of like, hey man, let's get going kind of stuff. So tell me a little bit about your writing background and what drew you to do that in the first place.
Yeah. I write a lot. I just wrote anything from a blog piece yesterday about Discord hacks, which is relevant to our company, because we're working on improving and making a secure chat. But, not only just about that, I'm also working on a book about Web3. And that's what I've been working on for about 3 years. So, but, I don't know, I probably also published like something like 200 blog posts and articles at various publications over the years. So yeah, that's my experience. I guess, why writing? I don't know. I just feel like, I think Joan Didion said it best. It's like, I don't know what I'm thinking until I write it out. It I think just helps me clarify thought. And I've met so many great people along the way who also will just respond, not in the comments. Comments are like not good, but usually they'll reach out on Twitter or like an email. And it's I've shut off comments these days. I'm like, I don't just, if you really want to talk to my face, like just talk in comments. But so I've been writing for quite a while, and it's been a great exercise and super fun.
Yeah, Twitter is a tough place to be a writer for sure. Do you find I've been working in Web3 and blockchain stuff for about 7 years now. Like I said, I don't run across many writers. We get like obviously a lot of software developers and big thinkers. I'm just curious if you like, and to me, like if coming from the reporting world and still being a reporter, I think a lot of reporters get really scared by blockchain and they think it's too complicated and too hard to understand. And I wonder if that's something that you think might keep more writers out, from being part of the community.
Yeah, I've been surprised. I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I've been working on this Web3 book for 3 years. Like I said, before Web3 was a term. And so I mentioned that because when I first started pitching the book, I want to say 2019, I mean, people were using the term Web3. There was a Web3 conference here where I am in Europe right at the moment. But anyways, but it was like, yeah, people kind of didn't want to touch it. I think it is confusing, and also they were like, we haven't heard anything like this pitched. There's like not a need for it. But I think that's changing. But I think you're right. I think the writing that happens in Web3 tends to be fairly news, PR, technical. But I think the reason I'm here as well, and maybe this ties into the answer, is like I was just at a very young age lucky enough to be inspired by just like a handful of amazing thinkers from like I read Kevin Kelly's work at like age 20, Lawrence Lessig. I mean, happy to talk about these people, but they were they imagined whatever people call Web3 or whatever people call the metaverse now. In the 90s, they were like pulling apart these ideas in this like amazing futuristic / like real way. And I think I just happened to connect. And then always have since then have been like, wow, I wish I could like maybe help push or contribute or shape some ideas like they did. So I think that's kind of where it came from for me, just being inspired myself.
I think on the fiction side for me, it was Neil Stephenson.
Yeah, of course.
He just seemed to nail it like really early.
Which book for you was No Crash?
The Diamond Age and Snow Crash. Yeah, those two
Diamond Age. Yeah,
really, had an effect on me. Well, I think I'm going to guess here. I think we're roughly the same age because I was reading some of your work about the internet, and you use a lot of Muppet analogies. And so, if we're both approaching about the big 50, were you lucky enough to watch the Muppet Show live on TV when airing?
I wasn't. I'm maybe a decade younger than that, but
Okay.
But yeah. So I think I grew up though with Sesame Street was for me what really I think drew me. And I saw Labyrinth, the Jim Henson movie, when I was young. Somebody showed me Labyrinth with my mom or something. So I think that's I think that to me was just I think all right, look, anybody listening right now who needs like a movie to watch this weekend, there's this really amazing documentary that just came out like in the past year about building Sesame Street. And okay, Sesame Street, you're like, whatever, it's Muppets. But actually, it was so countercultural back then. And I'm going to go into this for a second, but actually I think it ties back to some of the stuff. Is like back then, having puppets on TV that were like walking in the streets in like urban areas, like in the city, people around the world just like blown away. And it was this really countercultural thing. But anyways, like I think the really important thing that like inspired me there is like I think if you bring together a group of like creative, wild people with big ideas who also they were working like 20-hour days, who like can do the work. I don't know. I think you can like really make some positive change in the world. So I think that's probably like why I use Muppets a lot. It's like people kind of can relate to it, but like there are also these like countercultural things from the 60s that like, I don't know, they're just like really enlivened a generation. And like, I don't know. So I think it's like a callback in some ways, in my mind. That's my own story, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I would have given anything to go into Oscar's trash can and just see like what his house was like what it was like underneath there. That was
Matt.
Something that I just, go for it.
No, totally. Okay. So I was on Sesame Street once. So I did do that.
You were on the show?
I was on Sesame Street once.
No way.
But I was not age appropriate. You were one of the kids,
obviously.
I was not age appropriate. I was 11. I was like a little bit older than you should be when you're on Sesame Street. The kids were around me at like maybe 6 and 7. But yeah, I was. I fed Big Bird. I had one line. I didn't do a great job with the one line, but I had one line. So yeah.
What was your line? Do you remember?
Yeah, I had a sack of birdseed, and when Big Bird walked in, I said, "Here's your birdseed, Big Bird," like that. And it took like honestly, it took 3 takes. I was so nervous. I was like, yeah, that's why I only was on one time. They didn't call me back after that.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so then Okay, so I'm guessing now, or you tell me, were you growing up in New York City? And
New Jersey, so like
in
outside the
the,
city,
okay,
in the
um,
shadow of the city.
okay. Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, family, brother,
Yeah,
sister, all
yeah,
that.
yeah. What were your parents doing back in the day?
Um, like grew up like in fairly suburban like place. And it was yeah, my mom was, I guess, just like helped run an office for a lawyer. And then my dad worked at like a big company doing kind of like payroll stuff, you know. I actually like don't know that much. I feel like if anything, like, yeah, I didn't really maybe even know what they did until I was a little older, like in later
Yeah.
in high school. Yeah.
Was it, how does one go about getting on Sesame Street?
My uncle was the cameraman. He
Uh,
was a bit of a like, I don't know if black sheep is the right word, but he like didn't do the traditional like suburb kid like family life. I think he just kind of like made his own career, and part of that was yeah, he was there. And so I guess they needed uh, some kid didn't show up, and he called me, and it was close enough maybe to bring me in to fill in that day.
yeah, oh, that's great. That's great. And so what were you like in school? Were you always kind of going on the computer sort of path, or what were the subjects that you kind of appealed to you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know too much about computers. I was into music, and this surprises people sometimes who take my coding classes, because I've taught coding classes over the past 10 years almost. Is that I was a music major. I didn't study computers, and I actually thought coding was kind of like stupid and like had nothing to do with me. Um, so yeah, no, I didn't study computers at all. I was just music every single day. For me, the moment that like brought those two worlds together was discovering like Napster or like BitTorrent. Like just I was just the idea of like technology and music together just blew my mind and changed my life path, I would say.
Yeah, I always use Napster as an example when I'm trying to explain NFTs to somebody about
Yeah.
how prior, a digital file was mutable. It was just, it was you could copy it a million times and send it around. You could upload it to Napster, and then somebody halfway around the world can download it.
Mhm.
Um, did you play an instrument, or what was your music like? How did you get into music in the first place?
Oh yeah. I my neighbor, he moved in when I was like 5. You had like a new neighbor, and you're like, "Who's this new person?" You're so interested. You're like, who's living there?" And I didn't know who lived there for a while. But I just would always hear this beautiful piano playing from like the window. And maybe it was like a few weeks or something, and you're just kind of like, "Who is this person?" And like this kid walked out, and he was like just my age, and I was like, you're playing and I think it just gave me this tremendous confidence that I was like, well, if he could do it, I could do it. Or like, I'd be like, he would show me, and so I think just hearing like the beautiful potential at like, I don't know what age I was, 6, 7, 8 or something. I was just like, wow, I just want to do that one day. And so I just spent like every day just like playing piano, playing guitar, just playing as much music as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that interesting how kids can learn from other kids almost like osmosis? It's like it's such a different, especially if you're a parent and if you try to teach your kid something, it can be like incredibly frustrating and almost
Oh my
impossible
gosh.
in sometimes, right? But like I remember when my kids were learning to swim, and we had some older kids come over, and they saw what the older kids were doing, and they improved probably like 20 times in
Oh,
that,
that's so
one
interesting.
day than everything else that we've been trying to do for weeks.
Wow. I mean, we could all take a lesson from that, right? Even like, in our own lives now, it's like just being
Yeah,
around people who are cutting edge, smarter, like just working on different things. It's like
yeah,
the best way to learn and be
absolutely.
inspired. Yeah.
Um, so did I see that you went to school in Amsterdam for college?
I did my master's in Amsterdam, studying distributed networks, basically.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful city. How did you like it?
Oh, it's the best. It's the best. Especially back then, about 10 years ago now. Yeah, I think before Airbnb, I think everything felt so quaint, It felt so special to just be there.
Yeah,
No, but I had the best experience. I've rarely had a car in my life, just for various reasons of like they pollute and they're costly. And so to me, Amsterdam was the best because you can get across the whole city on a bike in like
great.
20 minutes. You go anywhere, 20 minutes on a bike, you're there. So
Yeah, no, it's one of the best parts about it. Um, and then going back to like Napster and what kind of like sparked you towards the sort of coding side of things, it sounds like it was sort of this peer-to-peer structure, right? Because I don't think too much before that we had ever had a peer-to-peer sort of network that had been enabled. Was that something that sort of like, made a light bulb go off over your head?
yeah, it's a funny thing to like experience technology after it's already saturated the world, right? Like I'll give you another example. Like I am still blown away when like Wi-Fi works. I'm like, what? Like I can like you know what I mean? Like I'm on a plane and like I'm chatting with somebody and like,
Yeah,
I'm like, how is that possible? So there's these moments that are just so experiential, I think, and you're like, I don't know, you like still feel them. And so it's hard to describe what like Napster was like, but it was up there. Like just the idea that you could go on your computer and get pretty much any song that existed. Because there was a time when, like, if you wanted to get an album or music, like, you'd have to, like, for me, like, go to New York City, like, go to all the music stops, like, it wasn't online. And the cool thing about Napster and maybe some of the technology now with like blockchain and Web3 is like I think that the innovation a lot of times drives the change. And so, what's back then it was like, well, what's going to have whatever, bands like Nirvana or Smashing Pumpkins or some of the bands like from the like what's going to have them put music online, it's like their record companies weren't just going to do it. Like they're not going to, innovate and cut into their own sales. So it like a lot of times takes like almost like a revolution where somebody kind of comes like flanked at the side and kind of like messes things up in like a cool way. So that was the experience. It just blew my mind where I was like, I can go online, get any music all of a sudden for the first time.
yeah,
And then not only that, just get it from like some random person in like Malaysia or anywhere in the world. I don't even need permission. So that just made me feel like, whoa, I guess if like in my parents' generation, I guess if like music was like rock and roll, like music was like freedom and like whatever like rock and roll means like to my parents, and like to me it was like code is just like the coolest thing. It was like it literally there's like the recording industry in New York City is like people in suits and stuff are like um
yeah, that's
like
definitely something.
disrupted and angry. It's so cool.
Yeah, yeah. We've been writing about that a lot at Essential, and a lot of podcasts are touching on how music is changing with Web3 now, and
Mhm.
and the ability of musicians to use NFTs or other structures to finance their own work, which is amazing, and they haven't been able to do that for decades. But yeah, speaking of record stores, I remember buying my first CDs, and they come in long boxes. Do you remember? They would because I think the
Yeah,
record
why?
stores, I think the record stores were cheap, and they hadn't switched over from like record bins, and the record, of course, is much bigger than a CD. So if they wanted to stack the CDs in the same bins, they had to like have this long
Ah,
cardboard box that came along with it.
that's a great
So
theory because otherwise it wouldn't stick out high enough to
yeah,
see it. It would fall
it'd
behind the
be
records.
yeah, exactly. It'd be
Oh,
buried
that's
in this
interesting.
big bin. And yeah, so uh, and then once you sort of like were, you know, just enthralled with this and with Napster, like tell me more about your path. Like where did it lead you from there?
Well, that's why I went to University of Amsterdam is really great school for studying networks effects on culture. So to me, I had taught myself how to code after Napster and BitTorrent, and I felt like I had the technical chops, but I just started to question, okay, what are we doing with this technology? Like, is it good? Is it bad? Like, these are the questions I was asking. How do we affect positive change to, and so that school really jumped out at me. Yeah, because they were studying like the effects on society. And so I went down that route and really started to get close to doing a PhD, and then realized I just needed to like not be in school anymore kind of feeling. And that was when I came back to New York City around like 2011-ish to kind of like understand what the startup culture was about and like fundraise and start a company. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but that was kind of what happened. So then I got into entrepreneurship, or whatever you want to call that.
Yeah. And is that where you started a company called 1 Month, right?
I did. Yes.
Tell us about that, because I like this concept a lot.
Yeah, 1 month is the idea that anyone can learn the code in 30 days. We started about 2013. We went through Y Combinator in order to incubate the idea. And when we came out with that, we came out with a kind of suite of like 20 courses with mentorship online that anyone could join, and then feel by the end of 30 days they would make 4 projects is the idea. Of course, everybody always asks like, well, can I get a job at Google after like 30 days? Like, no, the answer is not. Yeah. But there are a lot of like amazing things you can do in just 30 days. Like you can, from scratch, you can make a GIF search engine, or we made a jukebox with like using a music player API, and like you can do a lot of really cool stuff. It's just like getting started was always the thing. And as someone who taught himself how to code, I was like, all these books are so boring. It's like 100 pages of like math. I'm like, nobody wants that. Just show me how to make cool stuff. So that was kind of the premise of the company. And and I ran it with a good friend of mine for about 7 years. Yeah, it was quite a run.
That's cool. I know. I hear you about the boring part, and I've tried to get my kids into coding because there was a bunch of Minecraft, projects or whatever that services that you can get in, and you can start like coding your own changes to the game and skins and all that stuff. But I don't know, for my older son, even that was too boring. So, okay, we're in like the mid 2013 era around there. Had you heard about Bitcoin at this point, or when did crypto kind of cross your radar?
Well, there's a quote, and I might get it wrong, but it's William Gibson who wrote Neuromancer, which is like one of the big, and in it he says something like the future is now. It's just not evenly distributed. Like the future's everywhere. And that to me would really kind of speak to what it was like to go from New York City and then all of a sudden living in Silicon Valley. It was like I landed there and felt like the future was happening, at the same time, but it just was like more distributed. It was more in Silicon Valley than happening in New York at the time. And so I remember my first experience, it was like, I think I had heard about Uber, but all of a sudden there's like Uber, there's Lyft, there's like people are paying for things with Bitcoin. It was like, who else was there? That company, I don't remember their name, but like not Seamless, but the other one that delivers, it was just like everything was like in the future happening at once. And Bitcoin was part of that. And when I first saw people paying each other in Bitcoin, I just thought it was like internet money, like video game money. I was like, I don't know what this is. Like, what's going on? But it took a little. I had to be explained it to, and then, but I think slowly that was like the moment for me when after a handful of conversations where I pushed back and tried to like really understand, I could see it. So yeah, 2013 for me was the year that I was just like, okay, finally, this is going to change the world,
Yeah, Bitcoin didn't make sense to me either at first. It wasn't until I understood the blockchain technology underneath it and like how it enabled it that's what clicked for me.
100%. I totally get that.
Yeah. And then, so yeah, that must have been quite a culture shock going from New York City to Silicon Valley at that time.
It was a year. It was, I don't know if that's true every year in life, but like 2013 specifically, like there's a lot happening that year. So yeah, it was. I mean, it was 1 year after Coinbase had formed and they had gone through Y Combinator. So when we got there to YC, they had just been there, and I think there was a sense of like something stirring. It was obviously very small, but they obviously stirred the pot in the right way over there.
Yeah. So then, but then it was several years before you kind of like came back to web, or got into like the Web3 stuff that you're doing. Was it just the timing wasn't right, or
Well,
did you
yeah,
need it?
I just raised, for 1 month, and we had started that company, and yeah, we were really excited about building that company. So yeah, we went off on that path. At 1 month we had a Bitcoin course and an Ethereum course around 2016. And that's when I also started teaching this stuff at Columbia Business School. So I brought coding and Web3, which back then was just called like blockchain, to Columbia Business School. And so it was kind of in the background, like, of my day to day. It was like I was teaching some classes in it and like involved in it. And I knew a lot of the people in the space just because I was going to all the meetups and conferences and stuff. But yeah, it wasn't until a little over a year ago I stepped away for 1 month and was able to free myself up and just have a bit of a clear vision of like, or just like a clear air of like, whoa, what's next, which is, looking forward. And yeah, that was last year for me. So
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Columbia, because you've been teaching there for a while. I'm just curious how the students have changed in their demeanor, maybe about crypto over that period of time, and like what you've seen from that sort of perspective.
Yeah. So I mean, it's so funny because it just kind of, unfortunately, a little bit goes with like the hype cycles of crypto. I remember in 2017, that was the first year we added it, and I think it was like 10% of the curriculum. And I remember someone raised their hand and she was like, why is this so much of the curriculum? Like, why are we spending 10% on this? Like, what does this have to do with anything? The next year was I think it was 2018 was the big crypto, and it was like everywhere. It was the year kind of exploded into the mainstream. And I'd say since then it's been like, why is it only 10%? Now it's like 20, now it's 25%. It's like, why is this not a whole course? So so it's been funny. It's been funny to watch, but also, people understand it more little by little. And so also the conversation changes, which is nice. So yeah, it's really a pleasure. The business school students, if anyone is ever thinking of going to Columbia, they're like, this is just the smartest, I guess, obviously, but like, I feel like I learned so much from them. It's very diverse from all different countries around the world. And yeah, they're great. So
yeah, I remember when I went to Berkeley for grad school in journalism.
Yeah,
I was really surprised at how much I learned from my fellow students. The professors were great, of course, and they were well respected in the industry, but it was really from the people I was in the classes with that I felt like I really, like, that's where I kind of really learned the most. And maybe it's getting back to like what we were saying earlier, when kids are, they just see what other kids are doing, and it just like kind of like this osmosis kind of thing can happen.
Oh yeah, no, it's wonderful.
So now with Console, that's your new gig. It's a Web3 community, or it's kind of like Discord without the headaches and maybe the risk of getting all of your stuff stolen. to be concise. And if anyone out there, probably a lot of listeners have used Discord. I'm not a huge fan. I think I'm maybe a little old for it, but it is to me not very user friendly or experience wise. I get a bit overwhelmed with it. But why don't you tell us, you've seen this as a problem, and obviously there are way too many scams where people get their wallets compromised through phishing in Discord, and maybe you could just kind of lay out the problem that you guys saw for why you wanted to create Console in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great question. We started working on Console last summer. It's been about a year, and I think the easiest way to understand it which also has, I think, a lesson for, I'm a teacher, I guess. So, but maybe there's like a lesson also for new entrepreneurs or new people in the Web3 space, would be, I define three principles of Web3. There's like principles of what Web3 means to me. And to me, and I'll share those. And to me, last summer, it was just clear to me that Discord wasn't following any of those and didn't really care to do that. And so I was basically looking at the Web3 movement and the traction last summer with NFTs and DAOs, and thinking like nobody, even last summer, nobody really was calling it Web3 and like the cult, like kind of zeitgeist. It wasn't until like September, October. So I was like, no, I think I'm just like really feeling like this is going to happen. And when it does, like this is the year. These communities are soon going to realize that like Discord just doesn't have the foundation because it's just at odds with the principles. And so the principles, in short, are promoting decentralization, number one. Number two is ownership. So ownership of data, ownership of assets, it's just basically like ownership. And then number three is working in public. And the funny thing about these principles also is that they aren't so new, really. They've been around in the open source community for decades. And what Web3 does to me is it takes these principles, which most developers already kind of embrace in how they write code, and then it just applies that to other parts of life. And so when we look at communities, whether it's people crowdfunding to purchase a basketball team or to do an investment, or purchase the Constitution, or these are all real examples of how
Shout
people are
out to
using
Kraus House there.
Kraus House, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or it's an artist, in a city or in the suburbs, wherever, who launches an NFT collection and finds their tribe. Like these three things are all really important: decentralization, ownership, right? Having shared ownership, and then doing it in public, working in public, putting it on the blockchain in public. And when we look at what people are trying to build using those principles, Discord has none of them. Discord is very centralized. Just last week, we saw that they were able to just shut down a community without any vote or say, to just shut down the Tornado Cash immediately. They own that data. You don't own that. They own your identity. If they want to shut you down, they can. And they can access that or send it to whoever they want. And then number three, it's very closed source. It's not open source. They don't work in public. There's no quorum or like vote on like how the future of Discord is going to work for Web3. Really, Discord is built for gamers, and it wasn't built for Web3. And we all know that, at least in our bodies.
I was just going to ask you that because I didn't know that. Like, why did it all of a sudden seem like everyone in Web3 was on Discord? It seemed like it was like Zoom. I had never heard of Zoom before, and then all of a sudden the whole world is on Zoom.
Yeah,
I didn't know that gamer connection.
Oh yeah, there's a long history. I mean, I'll also share things that I love about Discord and answer that question. Is like Discord's really great for bringing together large groups of people who don't know each other, right? You could have like 10,000 people, 20,000 people in a Discord. You can share images, you can collaborate. There's a lot of really great things about it. And that did come from about like, I want to say at least 10 years now, or 8 years of like the gaming community. People would live stream games, they would chat, and it works really well for that. So Web3, or just a lot of people in the space, I think looked at either that as an option, or what else is there? I guess there's Slack. There's like these two options. Slack is, it's very pricey, and you need to have people's emails for the most part. So with Discord, there was like a bunch of workarounds that people started to figure out. And using bots, they were able to like authenticate. But
yeah, that's the one thing I understood was that, and that's blocked because they're using the blockchain, but there's a bot in the middle of it. And
there's a bot in the middle.
Yeah, that's one of your like it's a pain point that you point out, is like this gives attackers more ways to get in and to mess with you, basically. So Console is going to be directly on chain to the Console application. Am I saying that in the right way? Okay.
Yeah, if you look at, I'm sure assuming listeners are familiar with literally the hundreds of scams and hacks there's a whole list of them that's on our site. Actually, I think there's a piece at blog.console.xyz. I wrote a piece on this, and yeah, we studied over 100 different Discord hacks that have happened just over the past few months, and we worked with a cybersecurity team to just see were there any kind of like principal canonical lessons that we could take away from that and apply to console. And what we found is that a majority of all of these hacks, actually nearly everyone that we looked at, really just had to do with having the bots and identity getting hacked, somewhere in between there. If your identity is compromised, someone's identity gets compromised, and then they send out a phishing link or they try to do some bad actions in the community. And so, what we've been looking at with Console, learning from that, is where we don't use bots, we read the blockchain directly from our app. And if the smart contracts that we plan to deploy, they'll be all open source and they'll be audited, meaning just basically like reviewed for security. And you'll know what you're getting. Whereas right now you don't really know what's happening behind the scenes. And that's really tricky.
It's I've been dealing with this too, because there's been more and more of these hacks in the broader Web3 world where it's open source code. There's this stablecoin Akala. It just went to zero last week because a hacker or groups of several hackers looked at the code and realized that they could just they minted like 1.3 billion stable coins that this firm issued. So it just kind of crashed and went to zero. So on the one hand, open source is great because everyone can kind of look under the hood and help and add new features and make it better. But then do you also worry that it's also just sort of like open book for hackers and for people who have, bad intentions?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely a trade-off in that respect. Open source code powers the world, so everything from, if you have an Android phone, it's running on open source, basically like Linux. If you have a Mac, your operating system is like basically a fork of some open source code. Every server on the internet, about 90% of them are open source. WordPress, like I can go on and on. A lot of the code is shareable and open. The kind of like 101 of that, the basic of that idea of like having it everywhere, is that they tend to say that like if you have more eyes on the code and more people working it, over time it really becomes, I guess, like anti-fragile, basically. Like it gets stronger based on the more people that look at it and more people that use it. So I think that the payoff of it is really big. I think if someone's looking at the code and exposing a vulnerability in it, it's easy for me to say, but to critique another project I don't really know the details. So, but I'll just speak for myself and say that, we over the past few months have launched some modules that are open source, and, we're doing as much due diligence to do security audits. So having security experts review it, we pay for that, obviously, as well as setting up a bug bounty program so that we can send 100 hackers to it if you don't know how that works, basically we pay them. If they find the bug, we pay them out like maybe a few $1,000s. But we'd rather pay a white hat, basically like a good hacker, to find bugs and pay them a few $1,000s than having these, the potential of like millions of dollars stolen. So I guess all I have to say is like, I think the promise and the potential of open source is like proven and amazing. And if you're new to it and you're launching a project and you have like the potential to take millions of dollars, like it's really the due diligence of the founders, I would say, to like set up the right security in order to like slowly roll it out in a trusted way. And yeah, from the user's perspective, it's hard to know, I guess, like, is this trusted or not? Time is an ingredient that is so valuable, and I think we don't appreciate it enough. And like an example of that would be with Bitcoin. Like every time Bitcoin runs every day, it gets more secure and more trusted. Why? Because it hasn't been hacked. Like pretty much simply, it's open source code that hasn't been hacked. If that lasts for 1,000 years, trust me, that price is going to go up and up and up because people are just going to trust it more. But go all the way back to 2013 or 2010, Bitcoin is just like any other crappy shitcoin on the internet. It was like, well, who says it's good? But time is really important, and I think that's why the Web3 gets stronger every year. And I don't know that we appreciate that enough. But open source code is the same thing. It gets stronger the more people use it, and that's the goal.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I think that's where the problem kind of lies a lot of times in these hacks, is that people rush things. They don't take enough time, and they don't make security enough of a priority. They want to get out to market. There's FOMO, there's all that stuff. And it's, there are amazing projects out there, but it's also it's a bummer to see things, people losing real money. And over and over again, it's sort of like chips away at the credibility of the wider space. So I'm with you 100% on taking the time and making sure that security is paramount. So the other aspect that caught my eye is that you want to create a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization that would help govern Console. Is that a good way to say it? Or what help me with how does the DAO, what's the DAO's role in what Console wants to be going forward?
Yeah, so that's true. And also, I'll just I'll answer that in like as plain speak as possible to set kind of like the goals of why we're doing that. So, over time, we want Console to be like of the people, for the people, like like a document, like a living document of code. We want to learn from the communities that are using it, and we want them to have some kind of input into the future, right? So for example, like Discord right now, a lot of communities want MetaMask integration. Discord considered doing it about a year ago and got a lot of pushback from the gamer community, right? There's never really like a vote though. There's never really like kind of like an open, opinion of like how to steer this.
It's not democratic, right?
It's not like super democratic. At the end of the day, Discord, decides. And so we really wanted to try to like bring that democracy to the app over time and give people what I would call governance. You mentioned governance is like the question of, well, who gets a voice, who gets the voice, and how loud are they, and who gets to, help decide. So we really want to bring the community into decide. So, we're calling it a DAO, but I think over time that definition of DAO, I anticipate it to adjust and become a range of DAO things, anywhere from the strict definition where it's like a DAO is this like organization without anyone in control and everything's on the blockchain, which is like a very strict definition, all the way to like more of just like a decentralized organization, like a bunch of people. That means just like a bunch of people who have some shared ownership and can influence the direction of the thing. But maybe not everything is on the blockchain. Maybe not everything is like 100% decentralized. So I don't know where we're going to fall on that, kind of wavelength. But I think the important part is that we do want to share, whether it's ownership in the platform by having a voice, or shared investment in like the future potential of the app. Those are things we're definitely considering. So that's the path. We're definitely not there yet. We're in the early days, and that's where we're hoping to go.
Yeah. As someone who was considering creating a DAO, I can tell you it's a lot of work, and it's a full-time job in and of itself. If anyone out there listening is thinking it's like a side hustle, it's really not. And the thing that I discovered that I think is key is that having the community is the most important part, because those are the people who are going to help you make it work. Everyone's going to kind of go to what they like to do and specialize in, from their past work experience. And then, so then you can then all sort of align into, what's the community all going to get behind, like making Console work, so.
Yeah.
With that, I was just curious, what is the revenue model here? How do you make money from doing something like this with Console?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We're not so concerned right now about making money. I mean, it'll definitely have to happen at some point. I think there'll just be a lot of opportunities. I think that, for us, if we can make something that Web3 loves and that we can really be making a positive change for these communities, I think over time there's just like a lot of opportunities. If you look at WordPress, for example, WordPress powers literally 40% of the entire internet is a WordPress site. And WordPress is free, it's open source, it always has been. And yeah, it's like I would imagine like definitely multi-million dollar, maybe hundreds of million dollars, maybe $1 billion business. I'm not sure. It's a very large, profitable company. How do they do it? Well, WordPress stays open source and free, but if you want additional services like extra security for enterprise, if you want spam protection or certain modules and features and plugins, you pay a little bit extra. So I think that, anything in that range could be I'm not deciding right now, but I just think that if you make an open source product that people love and they can benefit from, there's always, customized, I guess you could say, or niche add-ons within that ecosystem. And so, yeah, we're first just trying to make something people love, but we're not too concerned that if they do love it, they'll probably love other things that we can make.
Yeah. And I think as we've seen with Web2, online communities are very valuable. And the great thing about Web3 is those communities can now be in charge of their own value, and not being exploited by a Facebook or or Google or whatever. And then okay, so now Console, you're sort of like sending out invitations to select people to kind of come on board. Like, is it in the beta phase right now? Is that how you would put it?
Yeah, we're in a beta phase testing with a variety of communities. And right now, if you're listening and you're interested in joining, you can come to our website, Console.xyz, and you can join our waitlist. We'll have an email for you there. But even better is if you're an admin of a community or a moderator, if you're part of a community and you want to bring your community, we're giving privileged access to communities first. So just go to the website, or you go to start.console.xyz, and there's an application form. Fill it out. We review every single application, and we're just making a rollout list of cohorts over the next few months as we test and we bring more people on. So yeah, we'd love to have you join us.
Yeah, I'll put all that in the show notes for anyone who wants to check it out, for the listeners. Well, Chris, this has been really, really fascinating. I just have to go back to one thing that you mentioned. You were on the set of Sesame Street, and you said, always wanted to do. You looked into Oscar's garbage can, and so, what did you find?
What did I find inside Oscar's garbage can?
Yeah. Don't just say an arm with a puppeteer. Can you just humor me here for my childhood and tell me that it was just this amazing trash cave?
So there's a wonderful man who was the voice of Oscar, and do you know who he was? There was two puppets on Sesame Street that were the same person, and that's who was in Oscars. Do you know who it was?
It's not Mel Blanc, right?
It was Carol Spinney was his name.
Okay.
Carol was the voice of Oscar, but also Oscar is like the Grouch, right? He's like very angry, but he was also the voice of that, like one of the happiest people on Sesame Street, or Big Bird. So Big Bird and Oscar were Carol Spinney. There's a whole documentary, a separate one about him that's really wonderful. But yeah, he was in there, and when I went, he was like, I don't know, it was just gray hair, like tiny frame man. And yeah, it was funny. The one thing I do remember at that young age though is like offset, they like all the puppets have dirty mouths. That's all I'll say. Even dirty mouth. I was like, excuse me.
I would love to hear that. I was just going to say, there is a great Elmo movie. I can't remember the name, but he goes through Oscar's trash can and ends up in trash land or something. My kids used to watch this all the time.
Oh, yeah. I think, is that Being Elmo, maybe? I don't know. I've seen one of the Elmo movies. Yeah.
Mandy Patinkin is in it. he's like the bad guy, and he comes and wants to like take all of the stuff. And so that's all right. That's about the limit of my Elmo Sesame Street knowledge. But
the Adventures of Elmo in Grouchland. That's what.
yes, that is it. That's how he gets there. He goes to your Oscar's trash can to get to Grouchland.
Amazing.
Yeah, definitely worth it. If you guys like, after you watch the documentary on Sesame Street, you guys should all watch Adventures in Grouchland. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Good luck with Console, and for everybody listening, there's more info in the show notes, and it'll be really cool to see how you guys develop, and good luck to all of that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. If anybody listening wants to check us out, we're on Twitter, Console DAO, and come say hi. And thanks, Matt, for having me. We're super excited to be sharing this with your audience. So thank you.
Of course, yeah, and I'll put all that in the show notes too. All right,
awesome.
Chris, take care. Okay, bye-bye.
That's it for this episode of Decent People. We are produced by Matt Solon. Music is courtesy of Brian Duncan and Kareem Imes. Take care.